The whole point of today from the Republican side was visibility. It was just to show that when the cameras panned round, that they wouldn't see just rows and rows of Doreen loyalists.
All right, well, let's jump to our first topic, which is, of course, the King's coronation across the pond in London. They just had the coronation for King Charles III. Obviously, this is after the passing of the Queen. And the coronation, while it's a widely celebrated event, it was not without its controversy. Hannah, how would you feel if you were a taxpayer and you were on the hook for millions and millions of pounds for something like this?
I can't imagine, not only for this, but just to support this whole joke of a family at all. I truly don't understand how people in England continue to put up with this. These people are losers. I mean, the Queen was based at times. Like, she, I think of all of them, was the most likable, and I guess you could kind of understand like the value that she gave to the country. I think she was very patriotic, but her offspring are a hot mess, and they have messy lives, and I don't know why. What is the point in spending millions of dollars to have these people fly around on private jets and lecture you about climate change and wear designer clothes? I don't get it at all.
Yeah, I guess I can appreciate the history and the ceremony and the tradition and the idea of the Like, I guess it's hard to put yourself in a British person's shoes and see how they understand it, but it's not cheap, this event that they had. We've got the Manchester Evening News here. The coronation of King Charles III is set to cost many millions of pounds, and the bill will largely be footed by UK taxpayers, although some of it is funded through property fees from property that is owned by the royal family. The exact cost of the coronation is yet to be revealed, and a budget for the historic event has not been disclosed by the government, so the total amount of public funds due to be spent is currently unknown. However, some predictions suggest the coronation could cost the nation between 50 and 100 million pounds. That is a lot of money. Now, their argument is that it produces more in like tourism and economic activity and attention and global prestige than the cost, which that could be true. I'm not sure it necessarily justifies forcing people to fund this against their will, but a spokesperson for the royal family said that a national occasion like this, a great state occasion, does attract huge global interest that more than repays the expenditure that goes with it. Indeed, it vastly exceeds it in terms of the boost to our economy and our nation's standing. Hannah, your thoughts?
I mean, I guess I have to see a little credibility there. Who's paying attention to England aside from when they have a wedding or a coronation or something like this? It's not like they're just gangbusters on any other front. But I still don't think that's an argument for it. I think that means you need to do better as a country and figure out something else to make you interesting. I'm still not on board. That is an astounding amount of money, and it kind of blows me away that, you know, you hear the people on the left criticizing Elon Musk, for example, and saying like, why don't you just donate XYZ amount of money and cure world poverty? But you don't hear that kind of thing lobbed at the royal family. In fact, I usually find a lot of simps for the royal family on the left, so it seems weirdly hypocritical to me.
Yeah, well, the king is actually estimated to be worth 1.6 billion pounds. So I would just humbly suggest maybe they could use the money from the property fees, and then the royal family could pay for it if they want to have a coronation, but they actually don't need to have a coronation at all. He already is king. He became king the moment his mother passed away, and most of the other European nations that still have vestigial monarchies don't do coronations, in part for this reason. Because it's all pomp and circumstance. There's no actual purpose, and it's very expensive, especially, and this part's unfortunate, and it's not their fault, the security that's now needed to gauge against, you know, potential attacks or threats is extensive. So, but you know what? The cost, it's not on us, so I don't care that much. The more interesting part to me was, while the monarchy remains, I think, slim majority popular in the UK, there is a significant faction of the public that opposes the monarchy, that the anti-royalists. And you're not talking about like 5%, right? You're talking about a sizable chunk of the country, and they wanted to have their voices heard during this event, and some of them were arrested. The leaders of these protests were arrested. Take a listen or a watch to this video clip from the New York Times.
Not my king! Not my king! Not
the whole point of today from the Republican side was visibility, just to show that when the cameras panned round, that they wouldn't see just rows and rows of Tory loyalists, and to show the world that we're not a nation of monarchists.
Yeah, so 6 members of the leadership of a group called Republic, which opposes the monarchy, were arrested. And at first I was like, okay, are they, because you see protests sometimes where people cross the line. They block traffic, they commit violence, they start destroying property, but it really doesn't appear that that was the case here. So here's some reporting from CNN that the London police are expressing regret over the arrests of anti-monarchy protesters during the coronation. The Met said which is the Metropolitan Police, said it made the arrests on Saturday based on the new and highly controversial Public Order Act, which came into effect when King Charles III signed it last week. The royal assent is a formality, but its timing just days before the coronation raised eyebrows. The new law gives police powers to take stronger action against people engaging in peaceful demonstrations. It criminalizes some long-standing protest tactics, such as locking on or physically attaching oneself to things like buildings or roads, which, side note, fair enough, you don't have a right to block the road. However, it also gives police the power to shut down protests before any disruption even occurs. And that's what they did here. Apparently, they were seeking to prevent them from disrupting because they thought they might do something that crosses the line of peaceful protest. And now the police, they haven't apologized for the arrest, but they said that they regret it. And Graham Smith, the head of Republic, who you heard from in that video, said that 3 Met police officers visited his home on Monday to apologize and return the items that were confiscated from him during the arrest. So it's all sus to me.
I mean, so one thing to know before we even get wholly into this is that Britain is no friend of free speech. The difference is in our free speech protections and England's, which you would think would be pretty much on par, are vastly different. They do not uphold free speech there. They do not have a First Amendment, and it is a whole new ball game when you are operating under their laws. It actually is quite dystopian, the state of free speech in England, and that should scare you because it's pretty clear that without a First Amendment right, that's where America would be too. These are Western first world countries. So I'm not that surprised at this. I think it's really odd the cops did that and then came back and apologized, but my guess is that they did these protesters and their movement a huge favor because one of the fastest ways to actually achieve political change is through nonviolent civil disobedience. And when you see somebody being persecuted for basically speaking up in a peaceful way against something that is unjust in their books and being persecuted for speaking up, that is actually quite compelling to the public. Martin Luther King Jr. called it the power of undeserved suffering. So I think they probably did not end up looking so good in the media over there or over here and decided to backtrack off this a little bit, but
we wouldn't be talking about it if they hadn't arrested these protesters. It would have gone on without a hitch. But they literally, the British police are just arresting people for expressing opinions they don't like at inconvenient timings. It is dystopian. It is completely antithetical to a free society, and it is having the complete opposite of the effect that they intended. But they're really not hiding the ball because the Met Police, from their official Twitter account, literally tweeted out before the event, "Our tolerance for any disruption, whether through protest or otherwise, will be low. We will deal robustly with anyone intent on undermining this celebration." That's kind of crazy because you don't have a right to physically disrupt it or anything. Any free citizen of a country has a right to protest or try to undermine in the court of public opinion the actions of its government. And the coronation is a state event paid for in part by taxpayers. And they have every right to protest their government, make it clear they don't support this system of government. And the police are literally like, yeah, if you try, we will robustly deal with you. And so they did. They arrested those 6 people and set an example. But it's not a great look when you're trying to say, yeah, we have a monarchy, but it's totally not like authoritarian or powerful or anything. It's just a symbol. We're still a democratic, free society. Well, you're kind of undercutting that argument when you also arrest anti-monarchy protesters.
That's exactly right. And I think it really is example number 5001 about how the government operates like a mob. These are a bunch of thugs. They are basically seizing your money, forcing you to pay for these people's lifestyle, forcing them to pay for the ceremony, and then arresting you if you speak out against it. I mean, it gives North Korea vibes, right? I think the only difference is North Korea would force you to show up for this kind of thing and pretend to be in support of it. But it's one step away. And it really should not be happening. Again, in a first world Western country that claims to be democratic, I think is disgusting and abhorrent. And I think it's one reason that you and I go so ham on free speech issues and won't give an inch on this front or any of the basic civil liberties covered under the Bill of Rights. Because if you give an inch, you quickly get to a mile out, and this is what it looks like. And it's just a disaster. And it means that it makes it very difficult to actually achieve political change in a peaceful way. If you prevent people from peacefully participating in their systems, you will eventually get violence. People will eventually riot. They will eventually form actual organizations to come and try to overthrow governments. We know what happens historically. It's bad for everybody involved, and that's why we've tried, as we've moved into the future, to structure societies in such a way where that happens less and less, and where we can get things done in a peaceful, cooperative manner. But this is very much in the opposite direction. And, the whole thing, again, this is one reason I think the monarchy is just, it should be done. It's such an old-fashioned, outdated idea. It's such a waste of money. And also, like, you're doing all this for somebody who, how old is Charles? I mean, like 70-something years old. He's going to die in a few years. You're going to have to rinse and repeat and do the whole thing over again. I don't know if you saw the images, Brad, they put out of the official photos of Charles and Camilla, like in their actual dress robes and crowns.
No, I didn't.
It looked like cosplay. It looked absolutely ridiculous that we're still doing this in this day and era. So I'm definitely on the side of the protesters, both on, just a principled stand for free speech, but also in their cause. I think that monarchies are just not where it's at anymore.
I mean, I'm against this idea, and I suppose it's a little bit complicated, but this idea of inheriting, or like, what's the right word? Like hereditary rule. The idea that you should inherit a position of power or prestige simply by your birth, not through any virtue or attributes or anything, seems just wrong to me. It seems like a perverse way to structure a society. Now, I do acknowledge that we do that in other ways, right? Like you inherit just by virtue of your birth, large amounts of money, some people do. Or by virtue of your birth on one side of an imaginary line versus another, you have rights and privileges as a U.S. citizen that you wouldn't get if you were, 10 miles across the border instead of Texas. You're in Mexico. Your life would be totally different for something incredibly arbitrary that's a happenstance of circumstance. But to do that at the highest levels of government and society seems to me just fundamentally unjust. And also, what's the positive? Or I mean, I understand there's some perhaps positive value associated with the royal family in terms of history and prestige, tradition, national unity, but doing it through just bloodlines and birth, it just seems like an immoral way to structure a society to me.
Well, and also, I'll just push back slightly. I mean, the royal family is a hot mess and has been for generations. You've got Nazis up in there. You've got likely child molesters with the whole Epstein thing tied up in this family. They've been a problem. You can date back into their very colonialist.
Who's the Nazi? Who? What?
The Queen's uncle, who was supposed to be king.
Oh,
yeah, this is deep. This is some deep history. But no, so Queen Elizabeth was not supposed to be queen. Her dad was not supposed to be king, but his brother abdicated the throne, and he and his wife that he like ran away and married, they were like very tied up with the Nazis. Yeah, really, really bad. So
and then Prince Andrew is sus, right?
Prince Andrew is sus. That's who I was he was tied up with the Epstein stuff. Like, this family has been problematic, and I think that you're right that when you have people inheriting a ton of money and a ton of power based on their birth and nothing to do with merit or their values or their character, it is a recipe for disaster. So I would be furious if I lived in England. I'm so glad I don't.